So, this afternoon's session. The challenge with ethical dilemmas you face as an advisor is what is ethical to you may not be ethical to another. In this session, explore ethical dilemmas of 2023 and expand your thinking. Our presenter, Rhett, will stimulate candid conversation and draw on the combined experience of the attendees to work through 3 significant ethical dilemma case studies of 2023. So, a bit on Rhett from his own bio. Hopelessly addicted to chocolate and coffee. Apparently, yes, he has already got plans for the Haigh's Chocolate Factory. That's good. As a small business owner, he understands and appreciates the challenges that fellow small business owners face and provide many services to small businesses from lived experience perspective rather than a large business trying to rebadge their small business. Loves working with self-licensed AFSLs. Nearly finished his Masters of Financial Planning, and then that's it. No more study? No more study, good choice. One of those crazy Victorians that goes swimming in Port Phillip Bay all year round. Is a collector of Ducati motorcycles, loves horses, the smell of horses and riding horses, with the height of a jockey. Beautiful. Please welcome Rhett Dass.
Thank you, James. Whenever I present, I always just like to get used to my voice, and then I'll sort of get on with it. As James mentioned, I think when I put this presentation together, I didn't really think that there could be lots of stairs. So for that jockey comment, James is going to be doing the roving mics up and down the stairs there. And unfortunately, Phil's going to be doing them down this side. So you might want to do lots of these ones where you stretch those calves out at the end of the day. So we'll keep him moving. So while I get myself organised, the challenge that was put to me was, Rhett, after lunch, everyone's going to be very tired. They've probably had lots and lots of carbs and maybe a late night. So I accepted the challenge and said, yes, I'll run an ethics session. And the intention of the session is to be interactive. So I am going to talk to you. I'm going to ask you questions and try to provoke thought. Sadly, a lot of these sessions or a lot of these scenarios that have come up are actually based on real life examples that I've been involved in. So you may think, oh, look, that's just, that would possibly never happen. But the reality of it is it could, and maybe one day when it does, you may be prepared by attending this session. So we've mentioned the polls. Now, I understand that the polls may or may not be working. So what I want to do is run the first session as a test. So if you get your phones out, go to the app, which I'm doing now, and we'll ask ourselves the question: is a breach of the Code of Ethics a breach of the law? Yes, no, not sure. We'll only keep these polls going for about 10 seconds. Just go with your gut. Do we have any results yet? No results? How about show of hands? We can do it the old school way. Is it a breach of the Code of Ethics? Show of hands. Yeah, if you're saying yes. I can't see everyone. How are we looking? Is that what, 50% of the room? How about no? Is it a breach? No. All right, there we go. It actually is a breach. It's a breach of the Corporations Act if you breach the Code of Ethics. Why might that be, if I can ask? Why might that be? Anyone, just speak out. I know it's being recorded. You got it right, yeah. And there was a couple there that said not sure, but why was that? Does anyone know? Because you're now a profession. That's why. So if you breach the Code of Ethics, and it's actually section 921E, if you breach the Code of Ethics, ASIC actually has the power to take action against you for a code breach. And the Code of Ethics is holding you to a higher standard than the Corporations Act. So when I talk to people about these things, I always try to speak of other professions. So for those of you who know me, yes, I am a solicitor and I've got a practicing certificate. And one of the things that I like to do is remind people in the legal profession, if you breach the code, or their code of practice, you can put your practicing certificate at jeopardy. And if you don't have a practicing certificate, then it means that you can't provide legal advice. So what I really want advisors to try and do today is think about that. Next time you're confronted with one of these ethical dilemmas, you think about, if you do the wrong thing or your peers think you've done the wrong thing, what does that mean for you? Does that mean that you could lose the equivalent of your practicing certificate? Because I don't really think it's in the vernacular yet of advisors, and I think it's something that you really need to start thinking about, when the things that you're confronted with, yes or no, could I lose my, the equivalent of my prac cert? And just remember too, it's not just what you do at work, it's what you do outside of work too that can have an impact on whether or not you can provide advice. And some of these scenarios that we're going to talk about today will talk about exactly just that. So, ethical considerations. I just want to run through quickly a little bit of theory, and then we're going to get straight into the good stuff. So the reason I like to run through the theory is because I want you to be able to think about how you're applying, code of ethics. And when I say code of ethics today, I'm also, I can also refer to the FPA Code of Professional Conduct, because they are they do relate. But I am thinking primarily or firstly about code of ethics. So the first thing is that ethics are not rules. And the reason why they're not rules is because if they were, and those of you who've seen me present before will heard me have said this before, that if you reduced ethics to rules, then all you'd get is spiritless compliance, and basically really smart lawyers would be able to find a way around those rules. That's why ethics can't be rules. Ethics has to be things like objectivity, honesty, fairness. They're the things that help you make your decision. So, the next thing I want you to think about is whether or not ethics are lived or not. Now, I did say as well that this is meant to be an interactive session, and I have taken the challenge to keep you going. So, ethics are not lived. What does that mean? Ethics are lived but not learnt. What does that mean? The first thing is this. There's two schools of thought. There's a school of thought that says that you can't actually teach ethics. And then there's the other school of thought that says that you can. I lean more to the side of the school of thought that says that you can't really teach ethics, but I'll give an explainer. Today I can talk to you about a whole range of things around ethical studies. I can talk to you about the Stanford Prison Experiment. I can talk to you about what they learned when they put what were otherwise good people in really bad situations, and those people ended up doing really horrible things. Now, as a result of that, you'll be challenged and you'll think to me, well, okay, what did those people do? And I think by living the experience or by being exposed to those experiences in this sort of environment, the next time you're actually presented with one of those experiences, your thinking or the way that you approach that situation might change. So that's why I believe that ethics can't really be taught, because at the end of the day, if there's a rule there, most people will go, I'm not going to break that rule because I might get punished. That's not really being ethical. I mean, you can have laws that you think are not ethical. You can have laws that you don't think are immoral. But at the end of the day, that's what I'm talking about. And we'll talk more about that later. Like we've said before, ethics is the hallmark of a profession. So now that you have, the title profession, you have a majority on financial advice. It's exclusive. No one can provide financial advice unless they have the same qualifications as you. And what comes with being a professional is that you have the respect from the public. So the public have trust in you. And in return for that, you're expected to put your client's interest ahead of your own. And in doing that, that's what gives you the right to call yourselves a profession. So, in return for that, society also expects that you'll come to sessions like this and keep on refreshing yourself in terms of undertaking more ethical study. And the last point there, which is your duty is to the profession, is actually higher than your duty to the client. And what does that mean? What it means is if your client asks you to do something that you're not comfortable with and it's challenging you ethically, then you might not want to do it. I get people that ring me sometimes. I had a guy call me a little while ago. He said, look, I'm not really a client of yours. And I said, okay. He said, but I need you to settle a bet with me or for me. And I went, okay. And he came out with this ethical dilemma and said, asked me this question, and I was happy to answer it for him. So again, the offer's out there too. If you know where to find us, you can look at our website, icompliance.com.au. But if you've got those ethical dilemmas, we're happy to take your calls. That's the little plug there for the business too, by the way. What is conduct that's unbecoming of the profession? Anyone want to ask? Anyone know? Put your hand up. I know this is being recorded, so we might have to get this guy up with the microphone. Conduct that's unbecoming of the profession. What is it? Do I have to come up there with the mic? Just speak louder.
Conduct outside of your practice.
conduct that's outside of your practice. Can you expand on that for me, please?
Your private life, social life.
Could be. Yep.
Putting your own interest before your client.
Yep. Anyone remember the name of a guy, Mark Babbage? Yeah. Who knows him? Everyone?
Yeah.
What did he do? He lied. And expound on that for me, please. So Mark Babbage lied.
He was a long-term AFL supporter of the Melbourne Demons.
Yep.
And he always wanted to see them win a premiership.
Yep.
So he went over to WA to watch the game.
Yep.
But in doing so, he broke the law and the COVID restrictions. I think he went through 2 states and territories.
Yep.
Stated that if you make false declarations, you're in effect being dishonest and
Yep.
acting fraudulently.
Yep.
And therefore he brought the profession into disrepute. And because he broke those sets of rules and those sets of laws involving fraud and dishonesty, he had his practicing licence stripped from him. And I think he had his sentence appealed just recently successfully. So I think it's either gone from 10 to 6, but I can't remember whether it was 10 years to 6 years or 10 months to 6 months.
Yeah, no, it's,
But basically he's lost his livelihood.
yeah.
And it raises some interest that if he's also, he can't be a director because he's been criminally convicted of a dishonesty conviction. So that means he can't be a director or director of a corporate trustee or also any other structures as well.
Yeah, that's a really good textbook answer, actually. So, who here thinks that he was hardly done by? Just as a show of hands. Again, was Mark hardly done by? You're his peers, you're judging him? No one. It's funny because when you read certain publications and, when people don't, I won't say which publications, but you can see all the comments there. There are a lot of people who are in support of him, so I was quite interested. And that's another thing about ethics too. People don't always come out publicly and say what they think. So yeah, the thing about Mark was that he made 2 declarations. He showed them a lease. So he'd said that he'd set up a lease that he was a resident of the Northern Territory and also had a Northern Territory driver's licence. So he showed all those things. So he wasn't just, like you said, dishonest once or committing fraud once. He did it a couple of times. And again, because he's now part of a profession, a respected profession, that just didn't go right. And actually when it happened, I was waiting to think, how long is it going to take before this guy's, A, punted by his dealer group, and B, going to face, the likes of ASIC. The interesting thing was, I actually agree that his sentence should have been reduced from 10 years to 6 years, and that's the lawyer and me coming out. And the thing was, he didn't actually cause client harm. So he did the wrong thing, but he didn't steal money from anyone. He just did something really, really dumb. But that's just my view on the matter. So moving along, like I said before, conduct that is unbecoming of the profession. No one's given me any answers, so I'm going to offer a few to you. Who here has slept with their clients? We've got some honest people in the room. It's your husband. Because, I've actually had a lot more advisors privately tell me that they have. Who here's borrowed money from a client? No, all right. Who here's supervising anyone in their professional year? You sleeping with them? Is that conduct that's unbecoming of the profession? But you might laugh, but it's serious, because at the end of the day, when you think about the principles and you think behind what's ethics, you think about integrity, you think about honesty and transparency, you're actually influencing someone. And the sad part about it is I've actually had to get involved in matters where people have been sleeping with their clients, and people are still laughing, but it's really unfortunate when someone gets taken advantage of and they lose a lot of money. So yes, you must avoid situations, I'll use this pointer, you must avoid situations and conduct which reflects adversely on the integrity or fitness of a financial planner and members of the financial planning profession, the FAAA or upon the FAAA, and that's the FAAA's own professional code of conduct. So if you do those things, you're likely to get thrown out of the FAAA and you won't be able to come to Congress like this and watch people like me speak, which would be really sad. So, are we all ready? Number 1, the dying client. I'm going to read this to you. And there are some polls after this. The client is terminally ill and has been told to get their affairs in order. They are expected to die between 2 to 4 weeks. There are life, TPD and trauma insurance claims on foot, and a claim is expected to be paid shortly. However, prior to the client's turn of events, the client ran a very successful business. However, due to their poor health, the business is now teetering on administration. The advisor is concerned about capacity and the client's wife has no idea about business dealings. She's not a client, however, she has power of attorney and may become a future client. They've never had kids. You have another client who you know is a subcontractor to that client and owed a lot of money. Yeah, I know. The clients expressed the wish to you that you'll look after their wife because they're concerned that when they're gone, their wife will be very vulnerable. And he's also concerned that his brother might take advantage of his wife. The client's brother has contacted you and said, I'm concerned that she has no idea how to be a power of attorney. And she's always late to return forms. You've noticed this. You've always noticed that she's never contactable and she's not computer literate. The client's brother is a financial advisor and has told the client's wife she should put that insurance money into superannuation to avoid it going to or being accessed by the administrators. And he could look after it for her. Shortly after, she contacts you and says, put that money into my super. Should we have a poll? So are we ready? Okay, first question. Will the advisor breach the code if they put that money into superannuation? While you're thinking about that, just remember that clients always refer other clients too. So if this goes horribly wrong, you might just have not one but a number of your clients saying not nice things about you. Again, that shouldn't be the reason why you're ethical or not, like we said before, but these are things that you may want to have regard to. Have we got those poll results up yet? Nope. Yep. Okay, this is interesting. As a percentage, what have we got there? 57%. So we're saying that the advisor will breach the code. All right, 59%. Did anyone vote yes? We'll get these mics starting to move up around, get some energy in the room. Who voted yes? If you want to out yourself as a yes voter. Yep. No pun intended.
Oh, you put one client's interest over another client's interest?
Yep. Any other comments there? I'd be interested if someone said no and why they said no. I feel like it's a yes, but that's just my ethics. That doesn't mean your ethics are wrong. I saw a really funny reel on YouTube a while ago about how to make a lawyer, and they're pouring all this stuff into a bowl and it said ethics, and they just put like this much in there. Who said no? Who wants to talk about, yep, right there? I knew you'd say no.
The advisor was, at that point, advising the client who had the power of attorney. I mean, probably need a little bit more detail in the context, but putting the money in super was likely fairly sound if you look at that in isolation.
Yep.
So, no.
Oops. Can we get those polls off the screen so that I can just keep going through? Look, I think, in all the, and I'm not saying that you're wrong and I'm right, but I also have concerns. Like if someone rang me about that scenario, I'd have some serious concern to say, well, we also know that there's another client there that's also owed a lot of money, so we sort of can't really compartmentalise that as well. I think that the fact that you know that this person, they're not in administration yet, but you know that they're teetering on administration. If you said no, could you stand in front of your peers and be judged by your peers if you said no, just out of curiosity? Yeah, you could? You can't? Yeah. Yeah. That's a really difficult one. Yeah, the comment there? We'll run that mic over to you.
If we're to be considered a profession, and if we used as a comparison your profession, the law profession, one of the key components is that we jealously advocate for the client. So we must take into account only that client's purposes above your own. So is the brother who's telling the wife of the client to put that money into superannuation breaching the code, is jealously defending the interest of that client? So he's advocating for that client.
Yeah, I think I actually went forward one slide because I was waiting for that to come down. But yeah, the next question is, would the brother breach the code? But yeah, with the advisor, if the client says to the advisor, put that money into superannuation and that advisor knows that they've got other clients that could potentially be impacted by this.
But there's also another standard saying that you can't act for two people.
Well, that's where I'm going with this.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
Yeah, so that's one of the issues. You're probably at that point going to have to start to think, am I going to have to choose here and what am I going to do? I'm not saying that's the right answer, but I'm saying that's something that you're seriously going to have to consider. Moving along to the next polling question, and I'll try to keep these rolling. Is the brother who's telling the wife, who is an advisor, to put that money into superannuation breaching the code? I don't know if these polling might just be better with a show of hands. So you're saying he is, so the brother's breaching the code? And I know this is being recorded, but we need those mics. Why is the brother breaching the code? I heard a few guesses here. No? Yeah. Oh, that's a really good point, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he's giving financial advice, yeah. Yeah. He was saying, well, the brother actually hasn't given the wife a statement of advice, so he's broken the law already. But from an ethical perspective, yeah. Third-party authority. So 90% of us have said that the brother telling the wife has put that money into superannuation has breached the code. So overwhelmingly, he's breached the code. I think personally, I think he has. You're putting your hand up there. I've got to race over with a mic over there. Yeah, right over there.
What about no?
Yeah, we can have contrary views. I like the minority view.
It's entirely possible. He's probably breaching a bunch of other laws, but is he breaching the code of ethics in the sense that it's not his client that he's actually doing something in relation to?
So you're saying he's just having a friendly, off-the-cuff conversation with his sister-in-law, saying, "You put that money in there, I'll manage it for you," is okay? He's a professional.
And she is not a client of his.
And she's not a client of his, yeah.
And him being a professional supersedes the relationship that he has.
I think the fact that he's saying to her, "Look, I can manage it for you," sort of tips us into that, this is really not cool territory. That's a technical term, this is not cool. But yeah, when you think about fairness, when you think about, she's vulnerable, brother-in-law, I can probably trust my brother-in-law, they wouldn't do the wrong thing by me, what's he going to do? This lady's, her husband's dying, a terrible illness. I think, 90% of us have said, yeah, no, the brother is in trouble. One more. Is the advisor breaching any code obligations if they know the client is teetering on administration but doesn't tell the other client who's owed money? Now, some people already uttered the answer to this before. Yes, no, not sure. Once we get those poll results out. All right, no. The noes have it. Yep, you got a comment there?
I don't mean to be contrary, but I'm a yes.
You're a yes?
On the basis that he's got an entire right to confidentiality and be breaching the duty of confidentiality to his client in providing that information to the other client.
Yeah. Like I said before, Yeah. I think the problem is that a lot of your clients will recommend other clients to each other. So if you don't manage this properly, you're going to have a real problem on your hands, because you're going to have a whole bunch of people who are going to talk about you and what you did behind your back, and you could potentially lose a lot of other clients who might form the view that you're not ethical. And I think the issue that you've got here is, I don't know if that poll can come off the screen now, but I think the issue that you've got here is whether or not you can actually serve two masters. And I think the question for the not sures, the question is really, I think it's time to make a choice. I think because at least if you make the call to say, all right, I'm going to have to choose between one of these clients, whether my subcontracting client or the other client, you need to be fair to your clients and you need to have integrity. And they're all covered by the code. And I think, if I was your client and I found out that you knew that someone who owed me a lot of money had tipped a whole lot of money in superannuation to potentially avoid, going to creditors or administration, I'd be really miffed. But I think at the same token, I'd probably respect you if you came to me to say, look, I've got a conflict, I can't act. Hands up there.
So you perhaps wouldn't take on the subcontractor as a client?
Well, they already are a client.
But let's say that you say, I can't continue to advise you, number one, but does the law, and this is the unsure part, does the law then guide us, because it doesn't state it, that you walk away from both clients? Because we're not
that's
allowed
another
to
option.
manage.
That's
we have to
another
avoid.
option. That is another option for you as well. I mean, I guess that the difference that one of the things I've noticed with financial planning, and I know with lawyers, the first thing you do is when the phone rings, is you go, is there a conflict here? Now at this stage, can I act for you? Is there going to be a conflict? I don't think in this instance that just because someone who's probably referred you, who's a friend of theirs, necessarily means that there is a conflict, because usually, that referral itself is an endorsement, that hey, this person's quality, this person's good. But I think the moment you know that there's a conflict, you need to make that call, and I think really that is the lesson for most people in all of this. In terms of keeping to time and moving along, what should the advisor do if they have concerns around capacity? What would you do? Again, do I need to start running up and down the stairs? Yeah, so the comment here is that discrimination? So you were saying it's discriminatory because she's not actually computer literate? Yeah. What about she's late to return things? So you're saying a lot of clients are probably experiencing the same things with clients? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, her husband is dying. That's a great point. So you're saying there, look, the husband's dying. She's probably got other things on her mind, but I guess, like we said, there's 2 to 4 weeks life expectancy here, so being timely is important. Any other comments? We've got one there. Yep.
It's not the client's timeliness, it's your timeliness as the advisor.
Yep.
She can be as slow as she wants.
Yep.
It's you if you need that needs to be timely.
So the comment was there that the advisor, it's not the client's being lazy or being slow to respond. It's your job as the advisor, if I'm hearing you correctly, to ensure that these things get returned in time. Somebody's saying it's time to get in the car and get this stuff back from her. Yep, potentially. Yep. Yep, got a couple more up the back there. Yes, Patricia.
Who's assessing capacity and what's the definition?
Well, that's a really good question. I think that there's an element of subjectivity here that the advisor needs to make a call, because if something goes wrong, someone's going to ask you the question, well, did you think that she was the best person to perform that role? And you've also had the brother-in-law, who is an advisor, contact you and say, hey, by the way, this person's not really performing the power of attorney role very well. Sorry, was that the question?
Sorry, say you assess the capacity isn't there.
Yep.
Then what do you do?
Well, that's the question I'm asking you. You're the professionals.
No, but say you decide she shouldn't be exercising the POA.
Yep.
Mechanically, what can we do? We go to VCAT to have the POA removed.
Well, you could look at potentially appointing another power of attorney. You could have someone else appointed jointly. So you've got a couple of different options there. You might actually get the brother-in-law as well. Now, I know the husband's not, he might not actually want his brother appointed as power of attorney, but there are a couple of different options there, and it's probably best to speak to an estate planning professional. Comment right there.
The person who's dying still got capacity.
So, yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah.
And yes, you can then get another power of attorney, but if they haven't got capacity themselves and she's relying on the power of attorney, so you're going to get another one.
Yeah. Well, that's, yeah. Yeah. So, do you want to give that mic? So, just say that again, because that's a really good point.
What I was saying is that if the person who's dying still has capacity, then they can make decisions.
Yeah.
And give you direction as the advisor. And in which case you're not relying on the power of attorney. If the person dying doesn't have capacity, then
that was deliberately vague in the question, so I'm glad you've picked up on that.
then you've got the situation where you've only got one power of attorney, and so you can't appoint a second or third.
Yeah.
In which case, you're reliant on that power of attorney, and
Yeah.
obviously, if you've got concerns, then get an assessment done of that person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really good point. So, like I said, there are actually, you've probably picked up, there's some parts in these scenarios that are deliberately vague, and I am again trying to prompt you. I think you probably had too much pasta salad at lunch. So, moving along, the whistleblower. A lot of news recently in the news about whistleblowers. So I'll read this one out to you. The AFSL has developed an investment philosophy based on their own model portfolios. Quotas are placed on advisors that are difficult to meet, and one of the advisors is starting to feel like clients are going to be disadvantaged or harmed, as advisors are being encouraged to place clients into an in-house SMA. The advisor has raised their concerns with their manager and was referred to the head of compliance, who is also a shareholder, and they disagree with the advisor. The advisor is not satisfied with the response from the head of compliance and cannot bring themselves to recommend these products to their clients. The advisor is concerned. Should they blow the whistle? Does this warrant blowing the whistle? So we've got another poll coming up. So what do you think about that? A, B, C. I don't expect you to be experts in whistleblowing, by the way, but I'd be interested to see what you have to say. David McBride, who was recently in the news, was a lawyer who blew the whistle. You might know about him. He was facing a charge of about 100 years in jail for what he did. So I think it's probably worthwhile acknowledging that whistleblowing laws in this country are probably not where we need them to be. So does anyone know? We can talk a bit more about David Bride. Okay, does this person... All right, a lot of people are saying yes. I'm really surprised at that. I'm genuinely surprised. Anyone who said no, tell me why you said no.
They're not breaking any laws. If you're not comfortable and quit, who do you blow the whistle? I don't like it, but that's the nature of the business.
Yeah. Again, it's been deliberately vague, but you know, would you be blowing this? Would you be going to the regulator for this? That's sort of one of the things that we're asking about. Would that change your answer? I guess.
Our regulator.
Yeah, ASIC. No. I mean, historically, ASIC's protection of whistleblowers hasn't been that great. I'm just putting it out there. You might disagree with me on that point too. I think when we're talking about whistleblowers, like I said, the protection of whistleblowers hasn't been that great in this country. Now, what I want to ask you is this. While you're looking at that, I'll talk a little bit about whistleblowing laws. You may not know this. I had to do a lot of reading about whistleblowing laws. Jeff Morris, we all know who Jeff Morris is. So all the text, all the research that I could do on whistleblowing laws was he was actually a text... If you're going to blow the whistle, he was a textbook whistleblower. He did everything right, whether he knew what he was doing or not. So if you're going to blow the whistle, these are some of the things that you must consider before you blow the whistle. One, is there going to be client harm? So what you're blowing the whistle on, is that going to cause client harm? And if the answer is yes, then you go to question 2. And the second question is, if you're going to blow the whistle, have you raised those concerns with your manager, the board, or your manager's manager? Have you gone as far as you can internally in terms of blowing the whistle? And if the answer is yes, then you move on. And the third part of blowing the whistle is, and I just want to double check this so I don't get it wrong, but the third part of blowing the whistle is once you've spoken with them, if they still say no, you need to ensure that you've actually got evidence, like real evidence, before you go and blow that whistle. And that the concerns that you hold, are genuinely held. So if you don't blow the whistle, then harm is going to occur. So if you've done all that, then you actually can blow. You're actually within your rights to blow the whistle. So yeah. So the comment there: does the advisor have an ethical obligation to their employer and fellow advisors? And these poll results are coming up now. So this is an interesting one because while we're speaking about this, you've also got an obligation, if you're going to blow the whistle, to make sure that you don't harm other people with whom you work. So David McBride, who was that lawyer who blew the whistle on the war crimes that took place in Afghanistan, some of you follow some of the spoof media sites on social media would have seen the post last week that says that he was actually going to do or up for more jail time than the people that he blew the whistle on who committed the war crimes or alleged war crimes in Afghanistan. So you actually have an ethical obligation to your employer. So even if you're going to blow the whistle, you have to ask yourself the question, what is this going to do to the people that I work with? Now, I think that what has really caused friction with his case, or the example that involves him, is that we're talking about national security here. So when we step back and say, who is this going to cause harm to if I blow the whistle? Now, I'm not saying he did the wrong thing. His lawyers, he was arguing, look, I had an ethical obligation, I was a lawyer, I had an obligation to make sure I was doing the right thing. Now, I know that advisors are not being faced with that prospect, but it is a good case study in terms of saying, this is what you have to think about. You know, if you blow that whistle, will you cause harm to other people? So that's one of the reasons why I think that his matter was so controversial. And it also probably didn't help the government that there were a lot of other famous whistleblowers who were writing letters to the government in support of him. So for those of you who watched that matter last week, he actually had to end up pleading guilty because his appeal was thrown out, and he pleaded guilty, and it looks like he's going to receive a intensive corrections order, which is basically one step down from going to jail. But essentially, I think it's fair to say that his life is over. He'll never be able to be a solicitor again. And I think when I saw him going into court, he's got a support dog anyway. So moving on, like I said, moral courage. Basically, I think I've touched on this, which is it involves being aware of potential retaliation or things that are going to happen to you. And as a result of blowing the whistle or having that moral courage, you know that people are going to take advantage of you. You're going to do it anyway. So, like I said before, it involves protecting others as well. So you can't just blow the whistle and go, well, I'm out of here and this is going to leave the whole place to implode. Continuing on. Shortly after their meeting with the head of compliance, the advisor is placed on performance management and their work emails are searched. So people are laughing. It does happen. There's evidence of the advisor emailing themselves a lot of internal company information, client lists, and they've recorded conversations that took place with managers, including the head of compliance. And it looks like if this information was made public, then it could validate that advisor's concerns. The advisor's sacked on the spot and their employer is considering what other options are available to them, including referring the matter to the police. So, another question for you. Did the advisor breach any code obligations by emailing that information to themselves and recording those conversations? If you live in Queensland and you said no because he recorded those conversations, that is one of the few jurisdictions where you can record people without their consent, but we're not talking about the law, we're professionals, we're talking about the ethical obligation here. Did they breach any obligations? You're saying yes. Who's saying no? Not many. I get the feeling no one's blowing the whistle here. And this is the sad thing. I think if we look at, like I said, all of those studies, if we took the approach of step by step, if you hadn't have actually emailed that information to themselves, but emailed that information to the regulator, then we might be in a very different situation. Comment there?
What's more important? So the number one of the code is obey the law. And contract is contract law. That's also part of the law. So he would have signed, or the advisor in this case would have, assuming they would have signed a contract, and within that contract would have been perhaps a clause in there for privacy and confidential and secret information of company resources and intellectual property. So by sending that information out of the company, they breach the contract.
Well, that's what I was saying. You've got an obligation to your employer as well. So it is a problem. It is very problematic.
Which one goes first? Is it your obligation to contract? Is it your obligation to do no harm? Or is it your obligation to the profession?
In this instance, because we're talking about ethics, I think if you can establish all of those steps that I've discussed, and you're a part of a profession, and remembering that the conduct that we're talking about, like if we use Commonwealth Bank, for example, that had the potential to harm a lot of people. So you need to be able to say, yes, this is going to harm a lot of people. I've actually tried to raise this internally, but I can't get that, I can't get anyone to listen to me. And by not doing something, they're the things that I think you need to be really, really mindful of. And that's why we talked about, again, with moral courage. You've still got an obligation, to the people, not just your employer, but the people who work for your employer, because you could put them out of a job, potentially. So, again, it's ethics. It's not always straightforward, but these are the things, that's why I guess we talk about these things, because I'm trying to challenge you to think about these things. As a group here, 90% of people here said that, by emailing that material to themselves and recording conversations, they just broke the law. Had he emailed that stuff directly to the regulator, would you all have a different view? I don't know. I can't put that up as a poll, but as a show of hands. Most of you voted that he did the wrong thing, but If they put that, they drop those documents off at the regulator, will that change your tune? Yeah, so the comment was there, the only thing really that he thinks is that breaching the code because he's recorded the conversation without consent. And I think that really is problematic. That is, deliberately in there. That is one of the things that are very problematic about this scenario. Who knows who Richard Boyle is? 2017, he worked for the ATO. The ATO came out, they had a new policy, we're going to be aggressive, people aren't paying their taxes, and they said we're going to start garnishing money from people who don't pay their taxes. He worked in, I think, the Adelaide office of the ATO, and he went to the media and told the media that what was happening in the ATO was, very aggressive, and there was actually an individual who'd had cancer, and his business was on the brink, and he was coming back from cancer, and he was actually writing faxes to the ATO saying, please don't do this to me, you're going to put me under, let's talk, I'm going to way through this. And he went to the media, went to Four Corners, and it came out and it was exposed. He wakes up on a Saturday morning to someone from the AFP there kicked his door in with a gun, and he got arrested in 2017. His life has been on hold since then. Now, he was there saying well, what you're doing to small businesses was wrong. And the person that he assisted by blowing the whistle on him said, if I could do anything to help this man, I would. He did go to his employer. He did raise the matter up. But again, without going in hours and hours about the full detail of that matter, I think the issue for him is whether or not, was there a broader issue here at play, and that I can't answer. But that is one of the matters. Again, the protection of whistleblowers in this country is not that great at the moment. In the interest of time, I want to move on because this is the last one. Any comments or questions? You guys are very flat this afternoon. Yep.
Podcast on ABC, the guy who blew the whistle on the Afghanistan stuff, he said he wished he had seen a lawyer beforehand.
Yeah,
hadn't consulted a lawyer.
Yeah. I think the reality is that a lot of people who do blow the whistle end up regretting it. And not just protecting the people that you work with or the people that you're around, but it's also the effects of your family and the retaliation. And I don't think a lot of people really factor that into their decision. And that was again one of the things that Jeff Morris did well. I think he ended up getting separated from his family or his wife, but that they were saying but he actually made a conscious effort to separate and try to protect his family from this event. Moving along. Who knows the Nine Inch Nails, the band? Yeah? Who knows that album? All right, The Downward Spiral. And this is all true, by the way. Your business partner's personal life has recently started to implode, and you are worried. He had a messy divorce which ended up in the courts. His ex-wife has called you to say he stopped paying child support again. He's not lodged a tax return for 2 years, and he's blaming this on his accountant, who has said, yes, I dropped the ball on this one. Your business partner was pulled over by the police for speeding, and he's lost his licence for 12 months, and he's now taking public transport to client meetings. This is also a Victorian example too, so you remind him too, by the way, that you need to renew your FAAA membership. As he was running late for a meeting, he forgot to top up his Myki. He knowingly jumped on a tram without a valid ticket. The next thing, for those of you who live in Victoria, the ticket inspectors boarded the tram, and he admitted that he did not validate his ticket, and it's not the first time this has happened. While he was reaching into his pocket to find some other ID, because I've actually lost my licence, and they actually make you give your driver's licence back, and that's another story. He was looking for some other ID, and some crushed up or a bag of powder fell out of his pocket. And the ticket inspectors picked it up, and he denied it, and he said, well, you can't prove that's mine. The police were called, and when he was arrested, because let's assume that this was a commercial quantity of drugs, or in Victoria they call it a trafficable quantity, the police were called. He had $3,000 in cash, and he said, I'm going to sign a statutory declaration that that's anti-inflammatory medication. Yeah, anyone remember Wayne Carey? Yeah. No, he's not an advisor. But he has been charged with drug trafficking, and he's asked for your help to act as a character witness. What will you do? Shall we throw a poll up? I'm not joking. A lot of this stuff is based on real life stories that I was working for a licensee, you probably know, so I won't say. I actually had a law firm once send me a subpoena because one of the advisors that under the license had stopped paying their child support, and sent me a subpoena saying, hand over those financials of what you're paying them. So, I think I went too far. This is an interesting one. Could repeated indiscretions, so the code of ethics, be considered to bring the profession into disrepute, and could it be considered to be a breach of the code? Repeated indiscretions. So, who here thinks that the speeding offence, it's a high-range speeding offence, he's lost his licence for 12 months, who thinks that is bad? Yeah, we've got a couple of hands, that's bad? Yeah. I got pulled over by the police one night. Those of you who know me, I've got a collection of Ducatis, so I really like to ride slow. I've also got a Mini Cooper S, and I lived in an area with lots of windy roads. And I was coming home one night after being at yoga, so I was nice and relaxed. And this is a true story, I would not lie. I was following a black Land Cruiser because I lived in a regional area and I did not want to hit a kangaroo in my Mini. So out of nowhere came this car with lights that were very distinctive and started tailgating me as we came up this hill. The Land Cruiser starts to slow down. I thought, oh, can you just pass me, please, just go around. And he didn't pass me. So I did what any Mini owner would do, and I shot off like a rocket. And he couldn't catch me. And those of you who've driven Minis know that when someone tailgates you, it feels like there is something in the back seat of your car. I got to the top of this mountain, because where I live, it's 650 metres above sea level, and I put my indicator on to turn right, and I could see that same car, and it actually caught up to another car. And I thought, oh, come on, just started tailgating me again, flashing his lights. I'm going, can you just go away? And fortunately, I didn't overtake this other car on double lines. Anyway, I put the right indicator on, and I think, anyway, what do you think happened? Blue and red lights. I was really thrilled about that, and I accused the driver of that police car and said, that was you down there that was tailgating me. And he denied it. And I could prove that he was lying. And because I have a practicing certificate and this was a speeding offence and lawyers aren't supposed to break the law, when it came time for me to renew my practicing certificate, I actually showed the submission that I had made to the Victorian Anti-Corruption Commission to show that, hey, I was not making this up and I actually was tailgated by the police. I still lost my licence for 3 months, but it was considered to be a low-range speeding offence. And I was really unlucky because the month before that actually lowered the speed limit even further. So, I probably would have just got away with a heavy fine. But anyway, true story. So who thinks these repeated discretions are going to bring the profession into disrepute? What about not paying child support? You're ignoring a court order there. What do you think about that? Is that bringing the profession into disrepute? Yes, Naomi?
I think if it was just one incident,
Yeah?
it would be potentially okay. But when you've got these continual indiscretions, if you pull them all together, then you are just bringing yourself and your profession. Yeah, the drugs addictive.
Oh, they're anti-inflammatories for his knees. Don't drop your baggie. Yeah. So it's a good question. Like, who here knows who Ben Cousins is? Yeah, he's the only person in the AFL to be suspended for bringing the game into disrepute after repeated discretion after discretion. Who knows who Todd Carney is? and does anyone to tell me what he did? Yeah, he's the bubbler. That's right. So, did he bash anyone up? No. He may have. All right. Did he go, we all sort of, did he have a history of getting drunk all the time and making a dick of himself? Yeah. And he got sacked from his football club. Now, I know that, again, we're talking about a profession here, but I haven't seen evidence yet of a financial advisor who's found or been found to have found to have, what's the word I'm looking for, committed repeated discretions. But I wonder, I know, for example, in Queensland, because that's where I practice law, or criminal law, 3 drink driving charges, you go to jail. Is that right? Anyone here been... But you get done for drink driving 3 times, it's mandatory jail. And I can tell you now, if you end up in jail, you will be banned as a financial advisor, no question. And the FAAA will probably chuck you out too. Is that right, Phil? Anyway. So just as a show of hands, because I didn't want to put it up there, but as a poll, would these discretions, if you want to get your phone out, tell me, would these repeated discretions, do you think it's going to bring the code into disrepute? What about not lodging your taxes? Yeah? But it's the accountant's fault. The accountant's let him down. Okay. I don't know if that poll's working. Are we working, James? It is working? Oh, was up previously? All right, sorry. 98%? All right, cool. My mistake. So where are we going with this? Standard 12. There's a comment up there, yes?
Thanks. I just had a question about that one. What about the ethical obligation for the implications of, how can I word this? Okay, if he's having mental health problems because of the breakdown of his marriage,
Really good
and
question.
there's administration errors that aren't being investigated. So let's say this person's going through a mental health breakdown on the marriage dispute, and in turn then just misses things.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't investigated the background behind it, is it ethical to sort of throw him under a bus by reporting him? Not talking about the powder, because that's clearly a criminal offence, but the other administrative things, like the child support, is it systemic or is it a one-off? Has he simply missed a payment, or is it a systemic issue?
And again,
similarly with the tax, is it
yeah.
late or is it multiple years and he has no intention of doing it?
Yeah, and that's why it's deliberately vague as well. But yeah, it's a good pickup, which is, it did say he's failed to pay his child support again. It doesn't say how many times, but it is, yeah. And I think that raises a really good question, which is, again, if you had a solicitor advocating for you because you were called to account before your peers, those are definitely the sort of things that you'd be raising. In this instance, has this person caused any of their clients any loss that we know of? No. But it's still not a good look for the industry, is it? Did he forge paperwork to say that he lived in another state? And did he go out and obtain a driver's licence to say that he had a driver's licence in another state? No. I think, like you said, if I was advocating for this individual, I would, if those things were real and legitimate, I'd be tendering, here's a doctor's report to say this, we're going to submit, it's a mandatory drug testing or regular drug testing, and hope like hell that he doesn't turn up to a drug test with a shaved head, because it's probably not going to be a good look. Got a question there?
Unlike our friend who went to Perth,
Yep.
a lot of these indiscretions are what I call private.
Yep.
So then how can private indiscretions bring the profession into disrepute?
Standard 12. Your timing is perfect. Yeah, standard 12. It's what you do outside of work that can influence. So who remembers that Porsche driver in Victoria? I don't think he's going to be what did he do in his own private time? Besides getting pulled over and being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But yeah, went around with a camera on his phone and photographed dead people. Got charged with I would argue that he's mentally not well either. But I don't think anyone wants him in the mortgage broking industry. So yeah, so what you do outside of work, and that is one of the key, if you take one thing away from today, take this away. What you do outside of work can have serious implications for whether or not you remain in the profession. There was a ENT surgeon, a nose surgeon in Sydney. He used to call himself the leading ENT surgeon or nose surgeon. And he was the one that was recently caught with that bag of powder. And he was the one who said, you can't prove that's mine, even though the police said, no, we actually got you. But yeah, he lost his his ability to practice medicine. And he was the one who turned up to a drug test with a shaved head once they let him back in practice. And he actually did have 2 clients die as a result of operations that he performed on them too. So, but yeah, it's likely that the behaviour or the conduct of what he's doing outside of work has influenced. There's another comment over here, but we'll come to that.
We know that advisors are captured under the code.
Yep.
But advisors don't only deal with clients. Advisors also deal with product. And profession includes, unfortunately, the provision and liaising with product. So where does product come into this?
When you say product,
All the people in the expo area.
so when you're saying if they do something wrong,
Correct.
are they part of a profession?
I'm asking the question.
I'm asking to clarify. Are you saying that the product providers, if they do the wrong thing,
Bullying, discrimination. There are some particular sections of product that have caveats, and they are, exemptions under the Discrimination Act, under the Bullying Act. But as advisors, as lawyers, as accountants, but lawyers and accountants have a discrete relationship with client. You don't deal with product. We have a almost parallel relationship with client, because in order to facilitate the implementation of our strategy, of our advice, we have to use product.
so you're saying is there a conflict here?
Whereabouts do we then take into account the product responsibility in this tripartite dance?
I'm not avoiding your question. That is a really long question, and I'm trying to get my head around what you're asking, which is saying from an ethical perspective, if the advisor's advice is influenced by product, is that what you're saying?
No. If we're trying to do something for a client, and where does product fall into the definition of the profession, or included in the profession? Because don't they have standards of due process to uphold?
Yeah, but I think for the purposes of this exercise, we're talking about financial advisors and what their obligations are.
Well, our obligations are to give recommendations,
Yep.
and recommendations also include the facilitation and implementation of the agreed recommendations, and we can't do those without using product.
I'm struggling to, I'm genuinely trying to get my head around your question, but I'm happy to take it offline and discuss it with you.
Sure.
Unless
So
anyone else understands it. Yep.
It's not an ethical consideration. The product provider is an AFSL.
Yeah, they're still an AFSL holder.
They've
Yeah.
got to do the Courts Act. You've also got privacy if they're breaking one of those. So I don't think it falls into our ethical obligations other than we think they're doing the wrong thing, in which case there's other regulations or rules and regulatory bodies that we can report them to.
Yeah. Do you want to get your phones out? I'll come back to that, but do you want to get your phones out and tell me, is knowingly boarding a tram without a valid ticket a breach of Standard 12? When I was a very young lawyer, I had to go to my admission, and I don't know if you've ever been to where they move your admission, and you have to declare all the bad things that you've done, and they brought you out in like groups of 5. And they're like all the people with the surname D, so I went through a letter D's, and I was first because it's DA. And they said, we've got an exception here. And I thought to myself, was it that speeding ticket? And I was actually really, really nervous. And I thought, oh my God, what have I done? Anyway, it wasn't me. It was the guy after me. They actually blocked his admission and took it back to a panel of legal services professionals to decide whether or not this person could get admitted. I ran into, so who here lives in Brisbane? Yeah. So that night I was celebrating out at a place called Fridays, which is the natural home of graduate lawyers on after an admission. And I ran into him and I said to him, "What happened? what's going on? And I might have been a bit slurry too at the time. I was like, what happened? And he said to me, oh, I got done for plagiarism at university, which is a dishonesty offence. So he nearly couldn't get admitted. So, yes, the act of boarding the tram would be a breach of standard. Is that going to actually get this person chucked out of the FAAA? No. But it's not a good look, is it? How many times can you board a tram without a ticket before it's going to be an issue? Are any of these, like, who here has actually read the FAAA Code of Professional Conduct? A couple have, yeah. Are any of these going to breach that code? Oh, well, the police have charged him, and again, it's deliberately vague. It's deliberately vague, but yeah, the police have charged him. If you get caught with $3,000 cash and a bag of powder, I don't think that's personal use. Yeah. So we've got to. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm not trying to give you ways to get around things, but if you get convicted of these, yes. If he does, if he lies, if he makes that false declaration, then he's committed fraud for his own personal gain. And this is why, because dishonesty offences, there's a subjective test, and there's the objective test. Is, was the conduct dishonest according to the standards of ordinary people? We're all ordinary people. And the next question is, if they knew their conduct was dishonest according to the standards of ordinary people, there is actually no definition of dishonest conduct in law. This is just how, generally speaking, how people test for dishonest conduct. Another poll. Should the business partner be noting the FAAA about the events? Who here knows what a notifiable event is? You've all read the FAAA rules? It's funny, when I was actually talking to people in the FAAA about this, they said to me, we don't get that many notifiable events. Has anyone here ever had a PI claim made against them that they lost? Like, you actually had to claim on your PI. Anyone had that happen to them? If you don't answer, you don't have to, but if you did, you're supposed to tell the FAAA. Who here knew that? A few, that's good. A few scholars in the room. So everyone's saying the partner should be notifying them about that. Who's a no or a not sure? I'd love to know why. I'm not saying that you're wrong, I'm just, you're in the minority. No one, all right, no one wants to put their hand up? What if I ask you another question? There'll be another polling question coming up now. Who's giving their business partner a business reference? Who's your business partner? No. So is this the point where we separate the two businesses, or separate the business into two? Yeah. I think you absolutely can give this person a business reference. You just can't talk. You just can say, look, you have to be honest. Yeah, I know that this person's facing charges for drug trafficking. I've been told about these things. Otherwise, the reference is worthless. But like you said up the back there, if this person is genuinely unwell and genuinely needs help, a business reference that would say, look, previously, they have caused no client harm, or I'm not aware of any evidence of client harm. Admit that these things are not good and have counselled them on these things. the drug, the white powder, well, again, if it was, if it actually turned out to be anti-inflammatory medication, well, that's what they've told me, then, but you could not give this person a business reference if you didn't actually mention those things. It would actually bring yourself under scrutiny. So we've got about 5 minutes left and we're getting close to the end, so we've timed it pretty well. These are notifiable events. So if any of these things happen to you, you need to tell the FAAA. Who here has received a notice? I know a lot of people received notices from ASIC for that life insurance study that went around a while ago. If you receive one of those notices, even though you've done nothing wrong, you really should be notifying the FAAA to say, look, I actually got a notice about this. If you're just, if any of the other companies that you own or are in control of become defendants in any criminal, civil or regulatory proceedings, you need to talk about that. You need to notify. It doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. It just means you need to talk about it. You're a very quiet bunch. We've come to the end. There's a couple of minutes for questions. Yeah, there's one up there. No. No. That's not in there. Phil?
Look, I'd suggest that it's covered under the fourth bullet point there, criminal, civil. So if it's a civil matter, then you may need to notify. But I don't think that's the intent, to be dabbling in your personal affairs, but to the extent that if there's a civil proceeding against you, it would be covered by that fourth bullet point.
Yeah. Any other comments? You ever got one there?
I had a question. How many notifiable events can you have before it becomes an issue?
Phil, I've got another one.
I don't think the world record, the Guinness Book of World Records has this as one of the criteria. I can't answer that question. Yeah. Rob Kimberley would be the best one to answer.
I think it'd be one of the, again, because we're dealing with ethics here, you'd really have to look at each matter, in all the circumstances on each matter before you could make a definitive call on that.
Okay, so it isn't like 3 strikes and you're out or anything like that?
Well, it's a good point, because that's what I was saying. Is it like a demerit point system? Can you rack up so many things?
So you would answer that by saying that we all have a reportable breach regime that we operate under, and there's no cumulative score that warrants necessarily ASIC to take action against you for more serious consequences, but it is cumulative to the extent that the more they see, the more likely they are to look at you. But it's not like your driver's licence and you've got 12 demerit points that you can lose.
Yeah. And this is about you reporting this to the FAAA, not to ASIC, by the way, just to be clear. So this is, you're a member of a professional association, and these are the things that your professional association might want to know about. Just like the example I gave you of myself, where I lost my driver's license, and I thought, if I don't tell them and they find out, it's just going to be a lot easier just to bare my soul and go, hey, look, I actually lost my license for speeding, just like 50% of people in Victoria, because we live in a nanny state. Any other comments? We've got about 2 minutes left. Otherwise, you can get out of here. No other questions? Look, you've been a really tired audience. I actually hope you got something out of that and you actually took something away from that. And look, if there are any ethical dilemmas that you want to discuss with me confidentially, you can always look me up on LinkedIn or find me at the speaker stand. Look, thank you very much, and thank you.